Everyone, thank you so much for joining. This is day 12 of Oracle integration training session, and in this session we will learn about a scope, and obviously we are using a scope to handle the exceptions. So when we are using a scope in our integrations, that we have concept of fault handler. That fault handler help us to design or like add the code what we want to write in case of exception. And obviously that global fault handler is also known as that exception handling block in OIC. So we'll discuss on that too. And then we have another types of fault handler, that is global fault handler. We will discuss on that too. And while working on this fault handler scopes and all, we will see that how we can use cut and paste option provided in generation 3 to just achieve the same thing, just like reposition in Oracle generation 2. So that's all we will cover in this session. So let's move to the first slide, which cover about the scope. So when we are talking about a scope, so a scope is a container type of things in integration, which is just going to give us a flexibilities to write our code or add elements and action in integration in a such way that whenever we'll get any errors, runtime error or any exceptions in the code, that can be handled. So I will show you one of the example that integrations which are already created, where if we don't have a scope, so what kind of issues we are going to face, and then after a scope we can handle that kind of issues. So we are going to see that one too. So when we are talking about a scope, so obviously in a scope we are going to add our elements. That elements, if for example, here you can see in the screenshot we have a javascript call in our integrations, and we know that while invoking javascript functions, that can create problems, right? It can create errors while invoking the javascript package due to any invalid inputs values we provided to code or any logics we added, right? So how we can handle that error in integration, that's why we have fault handler. We will move with that too. And when we are talking about and when we are adding scope in our integration, that a scope can be repositioned. And when we are talking about reposition, it seems it's something that we added code here, but later we decided or we change our logic of integrations, and we want that this complete code or that complete design should be moved from these places, or the for each loop outside the loop. So that kind of things we can do using that reposition concept. And obviously for in OIC generation 3 we have cut paste option for achieving the repositions kind of thing. So we'll see that one too. So for example, we invoke this javascript call in our integrations, and we got error, right? So that's why for each and every scope we are adding in an integration having their fault handler. So the first they having the default handler, and for instead of default handler, if we have various endpoint added in integration, that can have a fault handler for different errors for that specific APIs we can handle. So in simple terms, fault handler is something that in programming languages we are using catch block, or in PL/SQL we are having that exceptions handling block. So that is same as here in the fault handler. So if any error we will get in OIC, if we configure the fault handler, control of OIC will move to the fault handler, and inside the fault handler whatever logic we will add, that logic will execute, and then after integration process will move further. So it's not like that if we got error and after that integration will stop. So that's why if we want that whenever we got any error, we don't want to stop our integration, we want to process some other task in case of error. That's why we have concept of fault handler. So with the help of fault handler we can add a logic in a such way that whenever we will get any error in that scope elements. So here you can see in this scope, this is the scope I given name as JS call scope. Inside this scope we have three elements added here. This one is action, that assign, and the mid one is logger, and first one is java call, javascript call. If you got any error while running the integration on any of the endpoint, control will move for the fault handler for this scope which we added. So that we can work on that, so that we can write our logic in a such way. If we got error, so what next process we want to do with the data, we can do there. And obviously I told you that for each and every scope there is fixed one fault handler, that is known as default handler. And it's not limited only to have a default handler. If your scope having multiple endpoints, just like you can see, this is the scope. Here in the scope I had two endpoint, that one is rest soap and another one is rest. So if you will go and check the fault handler, you will be able to see this two fault handler, and these two fault handler are related to the endpoint which are there. And obviously by default we have default handler in our integration. So default handler is something that any error we will get in the scope, that error will be handled in this default handler. And if instead of default handler, if we selected any specific fault handler, just like service exception for soap web services and the API invocation error for REST web services, so this fault handler only will handle the error if we will get error this for this specific error only, that API invocation error or that service exception error. But if you configure default handler in your integrations, so whatever error you will get in any of the endpoint or any of the elements you got error in your scope, that error will be handled in default handler. So that's we have default handler where we can write our logic to move our process further if we have error in our integration. And obvious, when we are saying that we have fault handler, so that fault handler is having the capabilities to get the error details. So for example, we added the fault handler. So you can see this is the scope we added in our integration, and in this scope we added default handler. Here you can see the handler name is default handler, and in the default handler we added the log message. So once you will go inside the fault handler, any fault handler, it can be default handler or it can be global fault handler or it can be any API is a specific fault handler. So you will in the mapping side you will get the node related to the node related to exceptions or of the fault. So you can see our scope name is js underscore call underscore scope. But if you will move to the mapping for this fault handler, you will get the details of the error, what error we got here. For example, we invoke this json javascript call. In the javascript call we got error. So what error we got, what kind of error message, error reason code, all these things you will get in the fault object. And this fault object node you will only find inside the fault handler. You will not get this fault handler object or that the fault object outside this fault handler. So that's we have flexibilities so that we can get to know that what is the error we got when integration got executed. Obvious that based on that only you can move further or you can add logic and all. For example, if we invoke this endpoint and we got error will be handled in this fault handler. And here I simply just added the logger to display the log messages. Instead of displaying the log messages, you can add the switch statement to add the conditions that you can check if error code is 5001 or anything error code is something that, then based on that you can add another logic. So that kind of things we can achieve using fault handler object we are getting in the fault handler. So that's the one thing we have. And yes, in last we have global fault handler. So global fault handler is also same as the fault handler for each and every scope, but the differences is if our control move inside the global fault handler, our integration status will be in error. So in case of fault handler, if we added a scope and that scope got error, and that error will be handled in fault handler, and the control will move further, our integration will be still in the success status only, because status of the control of that integration is continuously it's in flow only, right? It's didn't stopped. But if control will move inside the global fault handler, that it's 100% that integration status will be in error. And obvious, like all the error messages, logs, and what is the reason behind that error, all you will get in the fault object. So just like here we have default object, the default for handler object. This is also known as a scope level fault handler. So when we were talk about fault handler, we have two fault handler, that the default fault handler or a scope level fault handler, or another one is that global fault handler. So global fault handler control will move inside the global fault handler only when we will get error outside that in error in outside any scope. So for example, in integration we added a scope. Inside the scope we have done our transactions, or we added into API invocation and all that, everything works fine. When control move outside the scope, we added another endpoint And if you will get error at that endpoint, so obvious you don't have any scope at that parent level for the endpoint. That's why control will move inside the global fault handler. And that when we are talking about the global fault handler, so in global fault handler you will be able to find the variables. So there will be only two variables can be accessible in global fault handler. That's variable will be global variable if you have any created in your integration, and it will be the tracking variables only. So instead of this tracking variables and global variables, you will not access any variables created in your integration canvas, and that will not be accessible in your global fault handler. So obviously you can see here I highlighted for creating the global fault handler for your integration. You can just click on this icon. There is one more differences between that fault handler, scope level fault handler, and the global level fault handler, that in your integration there can be multiple fault handler or that multiple scope level fault handler, but in your integration there will be only one global fault handler. That's global fault handler defines that your integration, that's the parent one. We can easily say that the global fault handler is something that parents one, that if we got error anywhere in integration and that error is not going to capture in the fault handler or the scope level fault handler, that error will be moved to the global fault handler. And then you can write the logic that what you want to do with that error messages. Do you have any other process to execute, or just you want to send that error message over notifications, and all the things you can do in global fault handler. And now last, for this session we have cut and paste option. So in Oracle generation 2 it was named as reposition. So repositions give us flexibilities to change the position of any elements or any endpoint we added in our integration. For example, here you can see in this example here we have three node, that's three and elements, and if you want to move the logger from here to any other positions, we have to make a cut of this logger and we can place that logger anywhere. Example, here you can see we have this logger one here, and if you want to move this logger one outside this scope, or you want to move this logger one to the fault handler or anywhere or outside this scope, so all these things you can do using cut and paste. So obvious when we are talking about cut and paste, so we have option to do cut and paste for a specific endpoint or a specific element. Just example, when we are saying that we have data stage, we have javascript call, or we have logger, it's all our individual endpoint or the individual elements, right? But and we can do cut paste for this individual endpoint, but OIC provides flexibilities that we can do cut paste on multiple items or multiple endpoints at the same time, so that we have to select all the endpoints in a single hit, and then we have to go for cut option. Then obvious same we will use to paste anywhere if we want to paste. So here you can see, for example, these are all the endpoint added here, and all these three endpoint or the element we want to move from here to another place at the same time. So what we will do, first we will have icon to select. You can see this is the first icon which allow us to select your elements. It's just like mouse cursor. So once you will click on that, you will be able to select your elements. So once you will drag all the elements where you have to select, and after the select you just click anywhere in your three dots, or you can click here in the cut icon. So all these three element will be cut, you can see in the outer line. And after that, whenever you want to paste, either it can be outside the scope, inside the loop, anywhere, you just have to click on this three dot, that is task icon, and just go to paste, and you can paste your copy elements here. And obvious another option is that in your integrations only, in the toolbar we have option to paste. So just move your cursor over there and click on paste, so that your whatever you have done, copy elements, that can be pasted in endpoint. So that is for cut and copy paste. So let's move to the OIC instance, where we will see the practical of a scope and fault handler, and we'll see that global fault handler how it will work. So let's move to the OIC instance. So here this is our integration. So I created one of the integration. This integration is working fine. So let me show you that how this integration is working. So I'm just going to run this integration. So this integration having the request payload, and in response it's returning some other values. So for example, if you will see the body here, I created integration. This integration is taking a PAN card number, and this pan card number we are passing to this integration having one javascript call added, and in the javascript we are validating that this pan card is valid or not. If the pan card is valid, it will return as the valid. If it's not valid, it will return invalids and all. But if you will see here, right, so this is let me add here one more thing. Yeah, so if I will click on run, so these two pan card details or the pan card values will be passed to the integration, and in response of this integration we will get the values. So what value we are getting? We are getting values like valid. So these are the valid pan card number that javascript function is returning. What is the logic behind that? Forget about that one, because we are not going to learn that the JavaScript code and the logic to validate the PAN cards and all. We will just have to look on that error we are getting, and how we can update our integration, and we will do changes in integration so that this error can be handled. For example, here we provide invalid PAN card number. So just we added in the code, JavaScript code, if PAN card number having less than 10 character, it will throw an error. For example, this is the PAN card, and I'm just going to remove one character from this PAN card. So now this PAN card number is total 9 characters, 3, 3, 6, and 9. I added logic that if PAN card number is less than 10, just throw an error. So if you will see, I'm just going to click on run. So instead of giving us the values as not created or adding any logic, our integration is going to be and in error. You can see we got error from in our integration. Our integration is not executed and not completed, and we are getting this error. You can see this is the runtime error, that's called exceptions we are getting in our integration. So why we are getting error in integrations? If you will see, and I will show you that how we can debug. So you can see our integration got started. We passed this value passed to that integration, the start rest endpoint, as we configure the request payload. And if you will see below here, we added the loop. So whatever element we added inside on this array element, we added the for each loop. And now for each loop, for each and every elements or every item, we are calling the javascript function, passing these values to the javascript function, and that value is returning, that javascript function is returning valid or any error. So if I will expand here, you can see the first value is correct. That's why the first iteration is correct. We don't have any error in first iteration. uh, can anyone unmute yourself and just give me hands up that everything is fine or not? Like, are you able to hear me or not? Ah, okay, great. Yeah, okay, great. So here you can see, once I will expand this iteration, right? Iteration one. So here we have only two iteration because we pass only two records and we added the for each loop. You can see. So once I will expand the first iteration, you can see the first iteration we receive message, and in the message, that is this value is going to be available in the loop variable that we will go to know last session, and having the first values as a pan card number 33J, and this value we are passing to javascript. You can see here, let me expand this one. So so this is this value we are passing to the javascript. Here we have javascript 1, we added the library functions call, and this functions we are passing these values as a parameters. So these parameters we are not able to see because I added JavaScript as a endpoint, and that's why it's not able to, because in when we are adding JavaScript as a call or endpoint, it's asking the parameters in the configuration only. So after that, if you will see here below, we have the response from the javascript call. You can see invoke javascript library with parameters. If you will expand here, you will be able to see the values, and that value we are getting as a valid, and that value we are adding in the logger. So logger is displaying the JS response as valid, which we added in the integration. After that, I added the global variable stitch and all, so that we can generate that response in array format. So that's all the logic. And again, if you will see in the second iteration we got error while invoking the javascript. So here you can see in the second iteration, global variable having the value, that the loop variable having the values, the second pan card number, but this time we got error while invoking the error processing message in functions called the javascript one. And what error we got the error message. If you will go to details, this is the error message we got, that error pan value is not a string or length is not 10 character. This is the error message I added in the JavaScript function. Right, after the session you can have a look on the JavaScript function and you can check. And this, that based on that we got error, right? Based on that error we got, we added we like obviously as this is app driven integration and it's returning response, so that error message we got in the response, right? So if you will click here, the same error message you will be able to see here, right? So let's move to the integration and I will show you how we can handle that error. So I'm just going to create a copy of this integration, creating clone, giving the name as 2 here. Instead of 2 I will give 002 as I already used 2. So now the 002 is created. It's not showing here because I added the filter. So now I will edit the 002. Allow me 1 minute. So here we added, so this is the integrations we added. If you will see, this integration is quite simple, that we added the trigger and want to take a request payload, and in the response request payload we added the for each loop. That for each loop, for each and every loop iteration we are calling the JavaScript function, and that based on JavaScript response we are added switch here, you can see a stitch here to update the global variable, right? All these things. And then we are mapping the same global variable in the response, so that that multiple or the array element can be written in the response here, you can say, right? Guys, allow me 10 to 15 minutes, I will be back, huh? So sorry to, I'm just getting a call. So now you can see same, that we created global variable, that global variable having the two nodes that which we have to return as a response. You can see the validate data. This is the target parents node, and the node having two attributes, that is pan number and the status, which we were giving in the response. Same we map in the response wrapper. So that's the integration. But where we are getting issues, we are getting error, we are getting error in this point, right? So when we are invoking this JavaScript call we are getting error, and due to that error control is moving outside, and that it's this integration is going to be complete in error because they don't have any mechanism or any concept to handle the error. Now that's why we have a scope concept in OIC, that a scope is saying that okay, inside that my scope put all the elements which you are expecting that can have in error at runtime, right? So what I will do, I will first add the scope, so as we have to iterate each and every record, and that loop is something that having that iteration. So this is the loop scope. Inside this loop scope we added this three endpoint, right? The same what we will do, we will add the scope here. To add the scope, just you have to move to the action, and just here you go below, you can see the scope one, right? So this scope you can add here, or else directly click on this plus icon where you have to add the scope. And once you will click on the plus icon you will get option to search. So search here a scope, you will get the scope. So just click here, a scope will be configured in that Canva. And here first I will change the scope name, so I will give the name as this is JS call, right? So Java script call underscore scope. So scope is the action name, and the JavaScript call is that the name which we are going to refer majorly or specifically in integration. So by the name only you will get to know that okay, this scope is related to JavaScript invocations and all. So now we added that scope here, and we have to move our endpoint which we already added in the for each loop inside the scope, right? So for adding this one, so right now we already added, so what we can do, we have to just delete this one and add the JavaScript call again inside the scope. So that's why that Oracle given you the flexibilities, no need to delete. If you want to reposition the node or elements in integration canvas, just click on this task icon, the three dot, and you will get option to cut. So once you will click on cut, you can see it will be in the positions that whenever you will move or paste, it will remove from here. So now I have to move this endpoint inside this scope, right? So just I will click on this scope here plus, and here you can see we have one option as paste. So once you will click on paste, this endpoint will be moved inside the scope. So a scope, there is like it's a concept of a scope only, that whatever endpoints or elements you added in the scope, you will not access, or you cannot have access of that endpoint outside the scope. So here you can see inside this scope we invoke the JavaScript, and this JavaScript endpoint given as the response as a value, valids or invalid, that kind of things, right? And here you can see we got error in that's logger. So the error is something that the response of this endpoint we are not able to access outside this scope. So that's why, as earlier we already added mapping, so it was saying that it's invalid mapping, that they are not able to find the mapping, the response of that endpoint. That's why it's getting an error. So what I will do, I will again move all these two endpoints inside this scope only. So for adding these two, so obviously we can go one by one, or instead of going doing cut copy paste one by one, we have option to multi select, right? For that, just click on this select icon. You can see this is the select tool. So just click here, and once you will click here, just select all these elements just by dragging all this one, right? So I will just click here and drag all these two. So once you will drag these two element will be selected, and you just click on any of the endpoint three dot and select the cut. This is the one option. Another option can be just select this two endpoint, and here you can see we have option for cut. This is the cut icon. So click here, you can see these two items come in the shape to cut. So now we have to paste this two icon here. So pasting this two icon, just click on this plus icon, and here you will see the option as paste. This is the one option. Another option can be just go inside this scope, click anywhere, and here you can see we have option for paste. Just click here, and where you want to paste, you want to paste before this endpoint, as we got these options once we click here. So you want to paste before this endpoint or after this endpoint. So I want to paste these two endpoint, those two element after this endpoint. So I will click here as after. So once you will select this one, this two will be moved inside this scope. So now here you can see these two came inside the scope. So now when it came inside the scope, just let's have a save on that. So here you can see this two control come inside the scope, and error got resolved because it is able to access the response of this endpoint now. Now that's fine, but if you will see when we will get error, where this error will be handled. So that error will be handled in the fault handler of a scope. So how we will add the fault handler of the scope in integration. To add the fault handler of scope, just click on this three dot or task icon of the scope, and here you will be able to see the fault handler. So right now you can see we have only one fault handler option, that is default handler. And if you will see in the our slide that in PPT we had multiple fault handler. You can see we had fault handler as service exceptions, ESCO, SOAP, and we had fault handler for API invocation error rest. So why we are not able to see this time? Because this is the scope. In the scope we don't have such action or such endpoint added, so that that can generate the error. So you can see we have one endpoint, that is JavaScript, and that JavaScript can have error. We have logo that can have the error, and all these endpoint can have the simple error, right? That's why we have only default handler displaying. If I will add a REST call here, we will be able to see the error related to the REST call. So I will show you in the last. So now we have to add the default handler. So once when we want to add, just click here, go to the fault handler, click on this default handler. So it's not coming again. I have to go at the default handler. It's creating problem sometimes. Let me go back and open this integration again. So here just click on this three dot, click here fault handler. So once we click on the fault handler, you will be able to see that the new fault handler scope is added. Here you can see this is our for each loop. In the for each loop we added the scope name as I will show you that that one too. The scope name is that main, right? Earlier it was that scope only. So as we added the fault handler, now this scope we added is splitted into two part. That's the this main is the scope, and this fault handler is the default handler we added. You can see the name as default handler. Now whatever elements you will do, right? Whatever action you will perform here, all these actions control will move here to perform only when you will get error in this scope. So if we will get error anywhere in this scope, control will move and it will move inside the fault handler, and the execution of fault handler will be processed. And after that you can see this is the scope, so control will move outside this scope, and outside the scope we have this loop. So again the iteration will process. It will not complete your integration in error because we handle the exception or error in the fault handler. So what we have to do when we will get error, so I will just want to display the error message if I will get. So display the error message, I will add the note logger here. So I will just drag the logger here, and here you can see I just have to change the logger name. So I will change the logger name as default, give the name as default handler logger. And here what message I want to display, I want to display message like here I will use concat error of scope is, and I want to concate the message, whatever error message we will receive from the fault handler. So how you will identify, if you will see the mapper side in the left hand side, what is the name of this our scope? The name of our scope is javascript call underscore scope. So here you will be able to see javascript call underscore scope fault object. So once you will expand this one, you will be able to see the fault is something that runtime error. And once you will expand this fault, you will be able to see the error codes, error reason, details, and inside the details, do we have something? Let's check. So yeah, that details having the all elements related to the error message. So what I want to display this fault message in the logger. So it will be like error of a scope is, and that fault I want to display. So I will just drag the fault here. So it got remove earlier one because it's not in configure status. So I will click on this one. I will delete this and write now concat error of scope is, and here now I will drag the fault here and will close the bracket. So click here, you can see it will display like error of scope is fault, whatever error message we will have inside the fault. So now click outside to save these changes. Now you can see when we came outside, our fault handler having one object or one element as a logger, that the logger will display the error message. Now it's done, right? We don't want to do any changes as of now. So what is our flow? Our flow is whatever array element we will pass as a request payload. For each loop will iterate on that. For inside for each loop we added the scope. So inside the scope we added the javascript call, we added the logger, we added the switch action to perform different operations, just like creating the response payload and appending the response payload as an array. And if we will get any error, control will move inside here, and if we will not get any error, control will again come to the last stitch. After a stitch it will come outside the scope, and inside the scope it will check the for each loop. If there is remaining record, this loop will again iterate, and once the loop iteration will be completed, control will move here. This mapper is the using this mapper we are giving the response. And obviously if we will get any error, control will move inside the fault handler. After the fault handler you can see the endpoint is done. After the fault handler we don't have anything, control will move here. This is the end of a scope. Outside the scope, this is the scope of loop. For each loop it will go, it will check if there is a record, it will process the record again. If there is no any record, it will move outside the mapper position. So this is the integration, we added the mapper. Just save the integrations, go back, and let me activate this integration. So our integration is activated. We just have to run this integration. Just click on run. And here you can see in the body we have to provide the value. So this is the correct value, right? So I will just click on run. So once I will click on run, this two value will be passed. So let me add a few more values here. So here let me add another values like for something, right? So if I will run, this three value will be passed, and in three response we will get. So now if you will see, we are providing any of the error values, right? Let me delete these two character. So now if we delete these two characters, so now first record is invalid, so it will throw an error or that exception. So as we added the scope, this scope fault handler will handle that exception, and again control will move to the second for each loop. So let me open this integration in another tab so that I can explain you that one. Go to design integration, and this is our integration fault handler. So let me open in the view status. So now this is our integration. So yeah, you can see. So now here you can see I am going to run this integration. So when I will run this integration, control will move inside the integration and will start the process. And if you will see, we are not getting error, right? That error got handled in OIC only, and whatever is the valid record, we got response for that valid record only. That error records got removed and we didn't get any message for error, right? And here you can see why we don't have endpoint, this error element here. We have not added logic in that way, but we added logic to handle that error. So here you can see this is the stitch where this data stitch where we are adding the response, we are connecting the response. So in case of error, right, when we got error here in this JavaScript, control is not going to move ahead to execute this endpoint. That's why that a specific error record is not there in the response, because once we got error, control will move here in the logger, in the fault handler. It will display the logger, and after displaying the logger, it will come outside the scope, and it will again move to the for each loop to iterate the records again. So that's why we don't have that record in the response. So now you can see we had the three iteration because we passed the three values as a request payload, three array element. Now if we will expand this one, we will see that three iteration is there because we got at first iteration in error. That's why here we have the error message. So if you will expand this one, you will be able to see the for each message for receive for each, that is the variable loop variable. Again this loop variable having the first value, this first values, and inside that if you will see they invoke the functions, that functions JavaScript one. And if you will see, once we will click here, you can see they're having that execution error. Error is something that we are passing from the, this message we are passing from the JavaScript code. And as this error we receive, that error got handled in the fault handler. You can see the fault handler message, and what is the log message? Message enter full fault handler of JavaScript call underscore scope. And inside the fault handler, what we have done, inside the fault handler we added the logger. You can see fault handler logger, default handler logger, right? This is the name we given. So inside the fault handler, when we got error here in the endpoint, control will move inside the fault handler. In the fault handler we added the logger, that is logger under the default handler underscore logger. In the logger we display the message. So move to the negative. You can see once you will click on this eye icon, you will be able to see the message. The message is error of scope is, right, it was the hard coded message and we mapped the error message. So what is the error message? You can see execution error pan value. You can see pan value is not a string or length is not 10 character. This is the error message we pass from the JavaScript functions. And if you will see the JavaScript functions, I can show you that functions too, so that you can have a brief on that. Obviously you can write JavaScript functions to add different logics and all. So here we have libraries. This is the library I created. In that library we have the validate pan functions, and in the validate pan functions, if you will click here, you will be able to see the message. So I'm just added the message like, if the type of value is not a string or that length is not equals to 10, we are throwing an error, that is pan value is not a string or length is not 10 character. This is the error message we are sending from the JavaScript functions, and the same error message we are receiving here, right? Pan value is not a string or length is not 10 character. So now here you can see what happened. After this logger, control move outside this fault handler. You can see message exit fault handler, and after the fault handler, control move outside the scope. You can see, so outside this, control move outside this scope. This is the scope, so control move outside this scope. Outside the scope we have the loop, so loop will iterate another iterate for another records. So that's why the iteration go for second record, and again they done the same process, third records and all. So if you will see, we pass the correct value here, and if we pass the error in the second value, so again it will do the same. It will handle the error in the fault handler and it will process further. You can see we got the response of two messages, and you can see we have error in the second iteration. So that's the way we can use fault handler to handle the exceptions by adding the scope. Now let's move to the same integration where we will get to know about the global fault handler. I will show you one thing. So here if I will go to the track instance, the status of integration you will be able to see success, right? So even although we have error in integrations, that integrations error we handle in exceptions block or that fault handler. That's why our integration doesn't have error. And as per the logic, it's saying that if control move inside the global fault handler, your integration status will be in error only. So let me keep a clone of this integration. I will give the name as 003 003 clone. You can see nucleated. Just click here. Now for example, here when control will move inside the scope, the global fault handler, so control will move inside the global fault handler only if we got error which is not inside the scope. So for example, this is our scope. If we will get error here, right? If we will get error here after this scope or inside the loop or outside any of the scope. So here if suppose we are going to add one variable here just to generate the error, nothing else, right? So there is no logic for adding this variable, just I'm adding this variable to generate an error, right? So that we can learn about the global fault handler. So I'm going to give name as var underscore error, and here I will do what I will do, I will map the date function. So now it will generate an error. Why it will generate an error? So current date time function, this is OIC predefined function. This function is returning a date value in a date format, and we are storing this date into the variable. That's why that variable, the string variable, that's why it will give an error. That string variable cannot store date type values. So now here you can see I came here, and here we added the assign to generate an error, and you can see this is a scope. So here by clicking on this icon you can expand your scope. You can see a scope got expanded, and if you want to minimize your scope, you just click on this arrow icon here. You can see the arrow icon, the scope will be minimized. So this is our scope. After the scope execution we are going to generate an error, and for handling this error we don't have any scope or fault handler, right? You can see once control will OIC control will get error here, it will move outside the loop. Outside the loop we don't have anything again. Then what it will do, it will generate an error, or your integration will be completed in error. So let me show you that too first, then I will add you the global fault handler. So let's move control outside, do this activation of this integration. So now you can see integration is activated. I'm going to run this integration. So now in the body, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to run this integration. So when I am running this integration, it will generate an error. So why this is generating an error? Because if you will see the first iteration only, when the loop iterated first time, after the iteration, here you can see inside the iteration we added the scope, and once a scope is going to exit and doing all the stitch and all, after that we added assign, right? Assign assignment 1, and in this assign we have the error message, right? You can see invalid values, the error message. Due to that error, as this error is not going to handle anywhere, that's why integration got completed in error. If you will click on this track instance, your integration status will be error. Why we are getting this error? Because we added the invalid expression in the variable assign, and we have not handled that error. That's why our integration got error, and the next row of our integration is not executed. The next record, it didn't execute the next record because we got error in the first record only, right? The first iteration only. So to prevent this one, that if we will get an error integration, I want something that if we got error in our integration, We want that our integration should not be completed in error, and I want to handle that error, or handle that error just by adding another actions or sending the error message to respective user. That kind of things, anything can be there. So what I want to, as of now I have not explained you the notification, so I will not focus on that. In upcoming sessions when we will learn notifications, lookup and all, I will explain you that more in more details. So now here what I will do, so here you can see, if I will add the fault handler for this scope, if I will add fault handler for this scope, that will be considered as a fault handler of scope level. Now you can see we got error outside this scope, right? So when we got error outside the scope, where this error will be handled, right? This error is not going to be handled anywhere. That's why we have concept of global fault handler. That global fault handler is saying that anywhere if you will get error which is not going to be handled in a scope, I will take care of that error. So how we will define the global fault handler? So just click on this icon. You can see this is the icon of creating the global fault handler. So just click here. New canvas will be displayed, and that canvas is for global fault handler only. And here you can see this is the global fault handler endpoint. This endpoint having the details of your error messages, and this is the retro fault error endpoint. This retro fault error endpoint is the one by which it is responsible for giving you the error message or giving you the error. That error can be the custom error you want, or that can be that whatever error message you want to define. So in the global fault handler we don't have a specified to error message here. So whatever error it will come from the integration canvas, it will display the error here. So now what I will do, again I will add a logger, and I want to display the log message here. So I am going to add here logger. In most of the project, while working on project, you have to add the notification here, so that whenever you will get any error, and error will be captured in global fault handler, you will send an notifications to respective user so that they will be aware about that integration got an exceptions error. So I will just change the name here. I will give the name as global fault handler logger, and I will here, oh sorry, I added the assign, right? So I don't want to assign, I just have to add the logger. So I will delete this one. I will click on this plus. I will search the logger, and here I will give the name as global fault handler logger, and here I will display the message. So again I want to display the message as concat error is captured in global fault handler. And what is the error message? The error message here you can see global fault object. This is the global fault object where you will get the error message. So expand here, you can see the fault same as the scope fault handler, and you can see the error code, error reason, details and all. So what I will do, I will just map this fault handler here. And now once we mapped, just add the logger here, click outside. So it will display the log messages. Save, go back. So I'm just going to activate this integration to show you that how global variable or the global fault handler will work and how it capture the error. You can see, so this is correct. So whatever value is there, that will be working fine. Just click on to run this integration. So once we run the integration, our integration got completed in error. We are able to see the error message here as it completed in error. A control move inside the fault handler to global fault handler. But in the global fault handler, we handle the exceptions, handle the error, and that error, whatever we want to do with the error message, we can do. We can send over the email notifications. We can insert the error log into database table. We can invoke any other endpoints. That all things we can do. So here you can see once we got the error in the iterations, after getting that error, control directly move to the global fault handler. You can see in global fault handler, and what we got in the global fault handler, in the global fault handler we added the logger. And the logger, what it will do, you can see once you will click here you can see error is captured in the global fault handler. This is the concat message we added, and this is the error message that value is invalid, the result of this one is null. This is the same error message. You can see this is the same error message we are getting while assigning the variable here. Once you will click here, open, and here you can see that value is invalid, right? The value is invalid. This is the same message we are getting here. The value is invalid, and that handle the error in that global fault handler, same it's returned to the integration by displaying all these things. You can see the payload here. We have the error code is 500, error details this one, and inside the error details we have all these titles, instance, mapper, and all. So that's the way we can add fault handler, that fault handler at a scope level, at global level, and we got to know about the scope, we got to know about that uh, the scope, and that obvious cut, paste, and all these things. Thank you so much everyone for joining, and obvious if you have any issues and you want to ask anything, feel free to ask. We'll see, we'll try to solve your queries.